So, I'm here for a new video. It's a nice Saturday afternoon, a bit rainy, and I've been listening to some people on YouTube explaining Tai Chi, and one thing struck me as an interesting commonality that I've started to notice, and that is just how well spoken they all are, including my local teacher. And it got me to thinking about this idea of unlocking the genius within, if you will, or how to take that typical phrase of we all only use 5% of our brain, and it's all that intelligence is dormant within you, and all these different techniques to unlocking it or whatever. And so I thought I'd do a video about genius, about being very smart, actually. So this is a topic that's very has always been very interesting to me. I've always been sort of fascinated and interested by this idea of why is it that certain individuals are, they come up with incredibly revolutionary ideas or discoveries. And the one guy that comes to me at the top of that list is Nikola Tesla. For whatever reason, maybe personality-wise, if you will, I feel a certain affinity to the character of Nikola Tesla. I've read some of his writings and so on. And what strikes me about guys like Tesla and also about guys like Einstein is that those are some of the biggest names when it comes to really top level intelligence, and it just so happens that at that level of intelligence they were not well, Tesla was a little a bit of a quirky guy, a bit strange, but what I mean to say is that they were not detached and clinical in the way they expressed themselves. But in fact, they were highly, they were notorious as philanthropists in the way they saw the world. I mean, Tesla's dream was to invent clean, sustainable, free energy for the whole world. So while Thomas Edison was trying to make money out of inventions and trying to constrain the distribution of the alternate current that Tesla had invented or discovered, Tesla wanted the whole thing to be free. When asked whether he was upset about whether Marconi was stealing his ideas, he said he was more upset about the fact that that the guy couldn't come up with any of his own. Right, so he had that sort of holistic view of the world, and so did Einstein, certainly, to come up with things of that kind. So he's always been quoted as quite the humanitarian. Now, the thing that interests me about these guys, and about also people who have been particularly successful in more sort of business-like type of areas and so on, is that the distribution shows that the guys at the top are not just a bit smarter than the rest, and not just a lot smarter, but they seem to view the world in a way that is just orders of magnitude richer and more interesting than the average individual out there, and even than the smart individual out there. They are just on a completely different level, right? And then it gets you to think like, okay, so what makes for this kind of intelligence? Because it can't be additive, it can't be incremental in the way that you would think, well, if I want to be a genius, what I'll do is I'll just read a lot of books, right? And I'll play a lot of memory games, and I'll do a lot of Sudoku, right? Or I'll get myself like the best instruction and the best like intelligence coaches and fast reading and these kind of things. It's an intelligence that it's on a different order. It is not just more of the same, right? And it reminds me of that movie, I think it was Memento, if I'm not mistaken, by Christopher Nolan, which is one of my favorite directors, or perhaps even my favorite Hollywood director, in which there's a guy who, when he was young, he would be like the I don't know, like the typical dude who would play sort of trivia on TV as the know-it-all guy, and he would get paid to do that, but never amounts to much in life because he's just a data bank, right? And even if you are a data bank that knows how to connect some of the points and so on, it doesn't seem to add up. So I have a couple of thoughts about it, which I want to sort of capture here, and one of them is the mistake that we tend to make when we hear this idea that we're only using 5% of our brain, and that if we only unlock the other 95, you come up with amazing stuff, is that we tend to think that because in modern society we are infatuated with the thinking part of the brain and the logical part of the brain, we tend to believe, or rather that thinking part of the brain tends to think, because that's all it does, that everything is a function of logic and thought. Okay, so your thinking part of the brain, which is dominant in most people, is essentially encapsulated in its own function, so to speak. I've made videos about this before, in the sense that each part of the brain, when in full functioning mode, tends to color reality, tends to color your reality by whatever its function is. So that when your amygdala goes haywire because you're having just a panic attack out of nowhere, or because something in fact scary is happening in the environment, you tend to see the world as fearful, right? And you tend to see yourself as a fearful person. In other words, that function of the brain has hijacked your sense of self and therefore colored your entire reality. Now, because in modern society we are infatuated by and hijacked by, or held hostage by, the thinking part of the brain, we are fully identified with it, and therefore we tend to imagine that that life is a thought experiment, right? Literally, we believe life is literally a thought experiment. We are caught in thinking and overthinking, and therefore when we think about genius and unlocking the other 95% of the brain, we think, wow, that means I can memorize and think 95% more than what I'm doing right now, right? Or no, that math is wrong. Well, 10 times more, right? Like just, much more. And that's precisely, Jesus, my math are really off right now. It would be 20 times more, right? Like 5 is a 20th of 100. So if you unlock the other 95, you would be able to memorize and produce 20 times more thoughts. There you go. Now we got it. Because of course the thinking part of the brain only thinks about thinking. It thinks that thinking is all that there is. That's what it's all about. So our first categorical mistake is to say that 95% of unlocked intelligence is made up of more thinking, and that's what's going to make us a genius, and that is phenomenally incorrect. There's another underlying assumption, which I think is also incorrect, and that is that because of the way our political and corporate systems are structured, and because of the way your own perception of self is structured, and we'll get to that in a moment, we tend to think in hierarchical terms, meaning that so countries have governments, right, and the government has a head of state typically, even if the powers are divided and so on. Companies have CEOs and VPs and senior vice presidents and things of that kind, and you have a kind of captain that is kind of trying to control and manhandle the way your mind and body operate. And there's a good reason for all these hierarchies to be in place, and that is that in a country, things need to be directed. And I'm just gonna put my little charger here before we ran out of battery in mid-speech. Here we go. So things need to be directed and organized, unless you are okay with whatever happens with sort of bottom-up self-organization, sort of the way nature works, and that is typically doesn't produce a good outcome. And by typically, I mean it goes all over the place. Is not particularly safe, especially if the different individuals in society or within a company are not well honed and well balanced. And then we get into the individual itself. The reason you're trying to control things is that you inherently perceive and feel and know, and a fact which is correct, that your individual parts are not well integrated and not well trained and not well honed, and if left to their own devices, will create a really shitty life for you, actually. And so the only alternative to chaos is control. Okay? And so if we look at societies, companies, and individuals themselves, due to poor integration, poor organization, and poor cultivation, we are not willing and would be poorly advised leaving things to their own devices, because entropy or chaos, put it another way, more explicitly, would hit, and things would kind of just go all over the place, and therefore hierarchical control is your only other option. Now, I'm not trying to solve politics, and I won't try to solve corporations, but the individual is something that we do have a choice in working at. And therefore, integrative and cultivative disciplines like Tai Chi and yoga and meditation are enormously important, because they give you the third alternative. And the third alternative is to let go of control, but that doesn't land you in chaos, because you have been working on integrating the different parts of your mind. So for example, you've been working on integrating the right and left hemisphere, so they speak to each other like this. You've been working on integrating your mind from top to bottom, so that the prefrontal cortex, which is the planning, smart, whatever language center, whatnot, speaks with the sensory cortex, which is your the sensations in your body, speaks to your visual cortex, which is here in the back, speaks to your limbic system, which is in the middle, speaks to your brainstem, which is here at the base of the skull, and all of those speak to one another, and they speak to the peripheral nervous system around your entire body. So you become quite literally an integrated individual, right? You rather become an integrated system, right? You are a well-integrated system. And in an integrated system, the parts keep each other in check. It's kind of like Switzerland, where your neighbor is gonna sort of, rat you out if you park the wrong way or whatever. You'll get a fine because your oldest best friend rats you out, right? It sounds like a horrible sort of. It sounds horrible to me. So maybe some of these bodily things, in a society are kind of, well, I don't know. I have my Guatemalan opinion about it, but it works. It works because the parts keep each other in check, right? You can see it across nations in the world as well. It is well known that, the way to avoid war between different factions is to create commercial lines between them, because now there's a lot of integration happening. Right? You integrate commercially, the incentive to go to war with one another is reduced to the point of zero, because everybody's got too much to lose, and they all keep each other in check, right? In going away from the extreme categories of chaos if you dissolve government versus a hierarchical controlling governmental structure, a hierarchy. You get also within the individual is the same thing. Like you can try to manhandle your way around life, trying to control the way your body and mind do, the things that your Jesus Christ, the things that your body and mind do. Or you can just go, you know what, I'll be a hippie and to hell with it, just let the chips fall where they may. But that's chaos, and it might not land you where you want. You have the middle way, which is to cultivate the integration of the body and the mind so that by default that integration produces good results. Now, that integration creates a systemic shift in the way your brain works. It's not just adding more, not memorizing more knowledge. It is not just even combining different ideas with one another. It is literally the fact that when something is perceived in the environment, it is not just memorized and related to other memories and thoughts, but it is also related to the bodily feeling that it produces in you, right? And so, and it is related to how it visually looks, so that your perception is more honed, it is more connected with the thoughts that it produces in you, it is more connected with the emotion that arises and with the bodily sensation and with the movement or action that you may take in order to harmonize with it. That systemic integration is what I believe can be called a level of genius. And it is interesting because it produces outcome that cannot possibly be produced by thinking really hard. You can't, there's no way. There's no way, because thinking is a very linear, one-dimensional point A to point B, narrow channel, almost like a little narrow one-way alley versus a massive freeway, or like the Suez Canal that just got blocked by some oil tanker or whatever, or like a freight boat, and so you go from like this narrow band to full on fiberglass broadband, in which when an input comes in or when an idea is produced, it is not just a mental idea as in a logical thing derived from memory, but it is taking perceptual, bodily, logical connections into account, and it produces something that is truly remarkable, or can be truly novel, right? Now, I don't think I can claim I'm any kind of genius, not even close, actually. I've always been kind of like a smart kid, let's say, well, good with words, well-spoken, if you will. Good at memorizing stuff and things of that kind. But I have noticed that as you cultivate mind and body, you become socially way smoother. You become very pleasant to yourself, and especially towards others. It's gotten to a point where almost every time I meet socially with someone, I keep getting texts afterwards of people reiterating just what a great time we have. We have tons of laugh. There's a lot of humor, and things are spotted in the moment as they're happening and given a funny twist right then and there. And that is, it's not a mental thing. You can't. Humor is a great indication of intelligence on that level, I think, because you're making guttural, mental, meta awareness connections, and they all result in this funny thing that you can't. If you try to do that by controlling the interaction, I think that would be kind of ugly. I think it would be very unpleasant, actually. And so I would like to propose that the way to cultivate genius that is, may not make you a great inventor or a great mathematician, if you will, but which is a very high level of true intelligence, because it brings harmony to within your system, and therefore in the way you interact. And that is, I think that the true smart, you can, I think there's being smart, right? That means, memorizing logic and cleverness. There is, and then there's intelligence, right? And intelligence to me is the thing that connects many of these levels together. That to me is genius. And the way to achieve that level of intelligence is to make those connections in the way your system works first, so that you can make them when input is then coming in from the outside, and so it creates that harmony. And I think that you have smart, intelligent, and then you have wisdom. And wisdom is, I think, when your level of connectedness has become such that kindness and compassion enter the picture almost by default, because you stop making a difference between one thing and another, so that you are not just in harmony with nature, but you are nature playing itself out, and you don't perceive the other as a separate thing from you. So that integration is not just between your right and left brain or your peripheral nervous system, but it has spilled over to your environment completely, which is in fact another way to define enlightenment. All right, so enlightenment is about an integration. Your integration within is to such a high level that there is no without. All right, so within and without kind of lose their meaning to you. So anyway, that's a video about becoming a genius and how to do it. Essentially, deep mind-body practices and meditation. And that's what it is. So I hope that helps, and I'll be back with more. Cheerio.